friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Today's video is in honor of International Women's Day and Women's History Month. I was invited to this incredible conference put on by Diane von Furstenburg and featuring so many women leaders speaking, women in business, women in sports, international activists, just an incredible group of people to hear from. I found it to be really inspiring and thought-provoking and moving, and I wanted to capture as much of it as I could for all of you to experience as well. So I hope that you'll enjoy this and watch to see what we learned.
YouTube creators who have built thriving communities and businesses, executives who navigate complex landscapes with authenticity, and activists who are on the front lines of human rights. You'll hear about how they're redefining what's possible and building better futures. I make a show that's all about those better futures. It's called Huge If True. It's a very optimistic show about science and technology and how we can use both of those things to make the world better. And I make this show, and I make it on YouTube, because I believe that when people see those better futures, they help build them.
So I want to welcome you to celebrate International Women's Day, and I want to thank YouTube. So I discovered YouTube. I mean, I knew about YouTube, but I never really realized the magnitude of YouTube. I mean, YouTube is bigger than all the platforms, than all the studios, Disney, Universal, all together. Can you believe that? And it's really quite impressive. So I went to a YouTube lunch. The CEO had a lunch. That's where I met Cleo, and they told me, oh, she's a very important YouTuber. And I tried to talk to her, and she avoided me. And then it turned out that she said she actually was intimidated by me. I'm not quite sure. And she came to lunch, and we talked, and I talked, I don't know, something about my hair being curly. And the next time she came around, she had her curly hair. And she reminds me a lot of me when I was a little girl, so I'm very fond of her. And I'm very impressed. I met the boyfriend. I tried, oh no, husband maybe, I don't know. I tried to convince them to have a child, but they're taking time. Anyway, so YouTube, thank you so much. I mean, this is hopefully the first thing that we do together. I mean, I'm very interested in YouTube because I have so much experience, knowledge, connections, videos. I mean, I have so much because I've been around for a long time. So in case you care, I'm 78 years old. But I should really be 300. I mean, because I've lived very, very fully. And last week I had a bad fall, so I feel a little old and a little, bruisey. But anyway, so this morning I woke up and I said, I have to try to be inspiring. So hopefully we'll do that. So I have been celebrating International Women's Day all my life because in Europe we celebrate Women's Day. And, but we've been doing it for, I think, about 18 years, and sometimes we do event in the store or in the studio, and this time we went a little bigger, and we're going to have a very interesting conversation. And the theme has always been in charge, because when I was growing up, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew the kind of woman I wanted to be. I wanted to be a woman in charge. I wanted to be able to pay my bills and do what I wanted and have a man's life in a woman's body. And I became that woman really, really early. By the time I was 27, I was fully in charge. And I became that woman because of a little dress. And because it was a little dress, the more confident I would get, my confidence went through the dress and went through millions of people, millions of women. So very early, I found myself as a conduit. It was not, I was living my life very openly, because otherwise I would read what fashion journalists would write about me, and I just thought, so I always try to be a little provocative, but at least it's my own words. So anyway, so I became a woman in charge, and in charge was always the umbrella of the brand. And then a few years ago, I started to think, what does it mean really to be in charge? And what it means really is to be your very best friend, because the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself. And so it's really a commitment to yourself. It's owning who you are. You own your imperfection, they become your assets. You own your vulnerability, you turn it into strength. But what I have to say is that it's really a daily commitment. The relationship you have with yourself is something that is a daily commitment. When you're successful and things are really going well for you, make sure you stay humble. Make sure you don't believe your own bullshit. And when things aren't so good, when you get fired or a project that you had doesn't work, then you know, okay, what am I supposed to learn, you know? And also, when any friends of mine gets a bad article or something bad or gets fired, I always tell them, remember that these moments that you're living through, these bad moments, they will make the best anecdotes when you tell your story, when you write your book or you do your TED Talk. So next time you have something bad happen to you, write it down in your diary, because those are the best anecdotes.
68 degrees. This is considered the optimal workplace temperature, thoroughly tested and meticulously studied by and for men. So while the men in the office are cozy and comfortable, the women are cold. Yet still, every morning her pumps click, click, click in to clock in. Checkbooks aren't all that she balances. It's career, life, love, beauty, health, all teetering on stiletto heel. But in the boardroom, she's learned silence, because a man's confidence is her brattiness. When he throws a huge pitch, oh, it must be Shark Tank. But when she speaks her mind, oh, it must be her Shark Week. The stack of docs on her desk is not the largest load that she carries. No one sees past the pinstripes and pencil skirts how she clicks on her keyboard with her head down to pretend to not freeze. How she is forced to store her dissent in the circular file, or how HR tells her to smile more.
I'm very lucky to be friends with the incredible Aurora James, who is an amazing founder of Brother Valleys, who is also an amazing activist and investor. She created the 15% pledge and is single-handedly helping to change the world of business for Black business owners. I needed today.
I think we all did.
Right?
Yeah, I think we all need it.
It's a weird moment to be celebrating International Women's Day when the word women is being removed from the NIH, and as a queer woman and a woman of color, we're suddenly not supposed to be identified because that would be DEI. It felt heavy.
Yeah, what do you, in your gut, what does that feel like it's about to you?
What it feels like it's about to me, and I guess I first want to say the heaviness that I know we all feel is, it's beaten back by days like today and rooms like this and faces like all of yours. So thank you for giving us the community we needed, and we hope to give it back to you. I think it's pretty clear that women have been amassing power, that we know we're stronger together, that we are opening businesses in record numbers, we are investing in each other, we're changing the way money moves in the world. We're voting to protect women's bodily autonomy in record numbers as well, in state measures like we saw just 2 years ago in Kansas. I don't think they were prepared for our collective power, and so I think that they're really doing everything they can now to rip it apart.
Yeah.
And so while it feels nuts to watch the news, I also hold hope, because women like Diane have been here before us, Women like Gloria Steinem and Audre Lorde have been here before us. But I am really curious for you, particularly because part of what you've launched in the last 5 years, part of the immense change you've made with the 15% pledge, beginning to create real fiscal and brand equity for diverse businesses. I've got our policy thoughts, but how are you making sense of this for you?
Well, and I ask you what you think that's about because I have all these assumptions in my mind, right, of where this pushback is coming from, but I also want to make sure that I stay curious about it. I really thought, and I'm still perhaps on that page, that we were in this moment where the patriarchy was kind of dying out, and it was its last moment where it was the hand from the grave that's I will get you, and
And then we were gonna stomp on it.
Yeah. And
but then it
died. But then now I'm oh no, this is like an angry rage male baby that's out, that's new, that's learned all these new skills, that's ready to go. I'm talking to 15-year-old boys that are real misogynists.
Right.
So I have to shift my own thinking, I think, in terms of how I address it, because in my mind I was oh, this is just a bunch of people with old school thoughts that are just gonna slowly disappear as time does to people.
Yeah.
But now there's a whole resurgence. So I think for some of it, it's about going back to the basics. I mean, I talk to people every day who truly don't know what DEI even means.
Mm-hmm.
They think that DEI is just black people taking things from white people. And listen, if you are in a group that has had a lot of privilege, right, and those scales start slightly coming closer together, you're gonna feel something that feels like oppression. And if you are a white man, you've maybe never felt that before, you're gonna freak out. And that's what we're seeing. So I think for me, it's about, okay, how do you have conversations, unpack the fear that's coming from that, and then also make sure that we all understand what the hell we're talking about. Because half the time I'm trying to negotiate with people who actually don't even understand really what DEI is.
Right.
And they're well, I just think that the most common feedback that I get, Sophia, is I don't think that shelf space should go to just black people. I think it should go to, the most deserving people. And I'm wait, so do I. So do I. And they're no, you just want it to go to black people. I'm no, that's literally not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is historically, it has just gone to the people who had the most access to the shelf space, and now we need to create a diverse meritocracy. Right? And that, honestly, guys, is a light bulb moment for a bunch of people who think that they hate DEI.
Yeah.
So I think some of it is just about, okay, let's unpack the things that are really obvious to us. And listen, I know there's a whole movement about we need to get our rest and we shouldn't have to explain, certain things to other people because whatever. I'm not from that camp. I'm going to explain it to you. Yeah. If you're not understanding, because my life depends on it. Yes. And the life of other people that look like me depend on it.
And I was telling her about this big pivot that I was making in my career. After 25 years at news, 11 years with the same company, and 4 years running MSNBC, I was ready to make a change. And so I'm laying this all out to her, and she immediately says, "You are designing your life." I was ooh, that sounds really good. What does that mean? And I started talking to her about where my life was going, where I wanted to take my career, and it immediately clicked that I was in charge of doing that. And so as I was thinking about this pivot, I'm thinking about all of the things that could go wrong. What's at risk? What might not work out? What might crumble because of this? And in a world where, I have a family, my husband and I have 4 kids, 2 of them are in college, so that's a lot of tuition. There was a lot of risk to taking the leap. But I knew it was the right time for me, and I knew I was ready to do it. And the only thing getting in the way of that period was fear. What if something doesn't work out? What if the dream job doesn't happen? What if the right opportunity doesn't come when I'm ready for it? And then I realized I cannot operate in fear. I cannot operate under any circumstance that doesn't allow me to bet on myself. And so as I'm thinking about this idea of fear and risk and what's at stake and what could go wrong, I also thought about regret and how much I would regret it if I didn't take the leap that I knew I could take, I knew I wanted to take, and I knew I was very capable of doing because I was afraid. How on earth could I look at my 16-year-old who's celebrating International Women's Day today as well and say, Mom couldn't do it because I was afraid that it might not work out? How could I look at my younger self and say, you did things that weren't possible when you started in this field. You already did that, but you can't take the next leap and do what's, again, potentially impossible. And so I took the leap. I left my role. I started charting a path of what the future would look like. I started activating a network that I had built for 25 years. And I realized, you can do this. You'll figure it out. I don't know exactly which road to take. There are lots of open roads, but I don't know which one makes sense for me. I know I will get to exercise some different muscles from what I exercise every day in my life running a newsroom. I might actually get to exercise now that I have a little bit of exercise. But whatever that looks like, it's going to be on my terms. It's going to be under my direction, my narrative, my way of doing it. And so as we're all thinking about our lives, and there were so many good gems just on stage from Aurora and Sophia just now, I want you guys to think about what is that one thing that you're slightly afraid to do that feels like it's just out of reach, that you may or may not be successful at, and then just go do it. Just go do it. It could be something big, it could be something small, but that thing that you always wanted, you are very capable of doing. We are women and we get things done. And so as you're thinking about how do you pay it forward to the ones who come behind us, how do you respect the sacrifice and the work of our mothers and grandmothers, think about what that one risk is. What is that one thing that you can pour yourself into? What's that thing that's a little scary and a little uncertain, and then just go do it. Happy International Women's Day.
In a YouTube video and then remakes her entire life. Tell me about the moment when you realized to yourself, I want to do this. I want to build this out so this is a real studio and a real enterprise. And not only do I want to do it, but I want to do it home in Alabama.
Okay. So I'm going to start by saying when I first started acting in videos, the main reason was because I needed the money. Okay? I had no idea that you could make as much as you could on YouTube. So I was headed back to work, and the creators, I was like, where you guys work? Where you going? They were like, oh, this is what we do. And I was like, okay, how do I do this too? So that, I could quit my job. Because I really didn't enjoy being a clinical laboratory scientist. And honestly, I didn't know that this was my passion. And I really think that it was God that led me to those people. So now this is what I'm doing. I learned how to edit. I learned how to write. I learned how to film.
Self-taught or you took classes?
Self-taught. So I learned how to do every single job that it would be to create the content. And I remember I went back home because now my family in Alabama, they think I'm famous, right? They're like, we saw you on TV, because they're watching me on TV, but it's YouTube. Like, we saw you on TV, so they think I have well,
That's how powerful she is.
It's the voice. But what happened was my nieces, they were like, Auntie, I saw that video where you told that boy he was cheating on you. Because at first, my videos were like for, I guess it was more like to relate with adults in relationships. And I was like, I don't like this. So now I'm getting ready to create videos with my family. So I will go back home in Alabama and come back and forth to LA. And I just said, you know what? I could do this at home. And that's what I started doing. And we post 3 times a week. And every one of our actors, they are creators. And we're just building this creator economy all together. So Yeah.
I think it's amazing because I think sometimes you hear YouTuber and you think of that as just someone who's a talent, but you are an entrepreneur, you are a businesswoman, and it is the business of this that I'm really interested in. And Shisa, for you, having come from the nonprofit world and now founded Our Place, which is a for-profit business that is very much centered in its purpose, I think sometimes we see those as two paths diverge. You actually see it as having a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I think that impact is a very complicated thing. I grew up in Pakistan. I grew up at a time where all I knew was being in the nonprofit space or being an activist. I was growing up in the post 9/11 world. There were terrorist attacks closer and closer to my own home. And there wasn't a startup ecosystem. So the women that I admired, they were all running nonprofits. They were all marching on the streets for women's rights. And I joined them as a teenager, and that was all I knew growing up. And then when I was 18 years old, I was lucky to be given a scholarship to study at Stanford University. So I moved across the world to an opportunity I had never expected and was exposed to this other way of creating organizations. And with that, this ability to attract and retain talent, build a good culture, give back in a way that often the nonprofit model can constrain. And I think that there's such an important role for nonprofits, but we also need businesses that do good, that give back. And very often we were having this conversation, we had this mentorship session earlier in the day, and one of the young women said, you know, I feel like I keep choosing jobs that just do not pay well because I want to have an impact. And to me, that's such a false dichotomy. This is a young woman who deserves to have an impact, deserves to feel like she has real meaning and purpose in her work, and be compensated for her talent. And I think we need structures that support both of those things, and it shouldn't be an either or.
When you were in meetings with investors and you were very clear about the fact that your business has purpose at the heart of it, what is the response?
Well, when I was in meetings with investors, I was rejected for many reasons, right? Yes, one may have been the mission, and we, Our Place, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a mission-driven kitchenware brand. We create beautiful, high-performance, non-toxic kitchenware. And the brand's called Our Place because it's all about building a bigger table around food. And when we went into meetings with investors, we got over 100 no's. And that was for many reasons, right? We all know the stats, less than 2% of venture capital goes to women. That capital itself goes to women who have more access. And so there were many reasons why we got rejected, including being seen as niche, right? Marketing, if you're going to create a collection for Eid or Nowruz or Diwali or Noche Buena, isn't that niche, right? But it isn't, because we all want to see ourselves represented.
I'm also laughing as the Latina on the panel who has the Our Place Selena Gomez distillation line. So I am like a poster child for what it was you were trying to sell. And it is hard when the person you are selling to in the room is not your core consumer, right? And so to Shiza's point, we know the stats. We have all heard the stats. We get sort of the basic premise of where this is broken. I think the challenge is how we begin to fix it.
Yeah. Enter the banker into the room. Money go around. So a couple of things on this. First of all, we get to spend at JP Morgan, we get to spend a lot of time with founders. And what strikes me about the two of you is curious, the fact that you went from in a lab to teaching yourself how to edit and cut. And I don't even know what that entails, but that's it. If you want to make something happen, you've got to be curious and you've got to be constantly learning. And then the founder's gut, I think, is a very real thing. So what I'll say about money is, and we were talking about this, which is I remember watching the two different road shows of Olaplex and On Running. And most people that are putting...
For people who don't know, who might not be familiar, can you describe
Olaplex is hair for women's hair. It's men's hair too, but I don't know, predominantly probably mostly women. And On Running is the sneakers. And so I was talking with a female portfolio manager who is a minority sort of in her group. And she said, it's so funny. The on-running CEO walks in and everybody's mostly male. And they say, I got 10 of those sneakers in my closet. Done. I want to buy the IPO. Olaplex, same sort of number, same kind of story. Had to explain over and over and over again hair and why you need this product and stuff like that. It's just, so it's interesting to me that we have this situation, and we were talking about this is sort of an echo chamber because we're all females, and to me we got to get more women making those portfolio decisions or running those IPOs or at venture capital firms, because I bet you wouldn't have the 100 no's. And so we'll see, maybe not, I don't know, but it's back to that curious thing that, I don't know, finance is a little geeky sometimes. Like, you got to be kind of like wanting to wake up and like talk about the S&P. We've got a bunch of JP Morgan women in the room who live and breathe by the markets. Like, I don't know, we need more of the geeks.
Subscribe to her channel. I encourage all of you to pull out your phones right now and do that, because she's amazing. You have a channel that I've loved for years.
Thank you, likewise.
If you don't know the backstory here, after serving in the military, Jackie followed her passion for beauty, building a career as a YouTube creator that has not only revolutionized the cosmetic industry, but also made her a powerful advocate for people of color in the beauty industry. As a beauty creator, trailblazer, entrepreneur, and champion of diversity and inclusion, Jackie has built an empire that goes far beyond makeup. I'd love to hear a little bit big picture about your channel from your perspective. And then you started a new series on your platform of writing letters to your younger self.
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
So, as some of you may or may not know, when I started on YouTube, like you said, it was to champion diversity and beauty, to basically just talk about the average experience as a dark-skinned consumer. It was rough. I mean, when I first started my YouTube channel, this is like 2009, so cosmetics were still orange or ashy or weren't dark enough. And a lot of my content was just stating the obvious. And so this was back when it wasn't trendy to be diverse or inclusive in beauty and cosmetics. And then it was almost like a switch was flipped, and all of a sudden it's what everyone was talking about. And so for years, I did what I could with what I had. I used the beauty space to talk about having people that look like me be represented. And it's something that I'm extremely proud of, but the longer I did that work, not that I would ever change it for anything, because it definitely needed to be done. And I'm so glad that I had a platform like YouTube that gave me a voice, where otherwise I probably would have just been ignored. But in that time frame, I started to realize when I was advocating for other people, in a lot of ways, I was not including myself in these conversations. I was not showing up for myself. I was overextending for other people, but oftentimes like just not checking in. You know what I mean? I think a lot of us as women, like, we have the tendency to like put everybody before us, consistently pouring from an empty cup. And so I started love letters to her because I just started giving myself permission to just exist, and not just exist in spite of, or not just exist as a means of only doing for others. And it doesn't mean that I will ever not do for others, but I wanted to give myself permission to just check in, talk to myself, and be like, actually, maybe I don't love doing that, or maybe I don't want to say yes to that because I'm overextended or I'm tired, or and it really felt like very freeing and therapeutic. And I was like, wow, like I can feel good in the work that I do too, not always for the benefit of others. I'm also the child of an immigrant, and I'm the first one of 7. So we are very used to putting everybody before us. And I did that for a long time to my detriment. So I started this series as a means to be like, I'm doing whatever the hell I want now, period. And it's been amazing. So yeah, I'm really proud of that.
I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. This is truly an honor.
I am from New York. I have been obsessed with DVF for years. I used to go to the sample sales down on like 28th Street back in the day, if anyone remembers that. So this is truly a full circle moment for me. But yeah, so Ellie the elephant is our beloved mascot. This season, or our past season in 2024, she really took off. We introduced her in 2021 when we first moved to Brooklyn. It was kind of an introduction of a new mascot. We had a mascot that preceded her, and it's an interesting story, us being the New York Liberty, inspired by the Statue of Liberty. There's a story about when the Brooklyn Bridge was built in the 1800s, they didn't know how secure it was, and they had a PR stunt where they had a herd of elephants walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to prove that it was strong. And we just love the symbolism of what elephants represent. Not so much native to New York, but when we thought about the rich history of elephants, as well as Ellie being short for elephant, but also tying to Ellis Island, home of the Statue of Liberty, and everything that she represents, we saw that there was some unique synergy there. But then just in terms of the identity and the personality of Ellie, we wanted someone that really felt true and authentic to Brooklyn. You know, such a rich culture, such a unique culture there. And I really believe that Brooklyn culture influences not only the culture in New York or our country, but also across the world. So the fact that Ellie has become a fashion icon, she's been featured in Vogue magazine and walked the Glamour Women of the Year red carpet. It's truly amazing. You know, I don't know how many people have been to a New York Liberty game, right? So you've been able to experience her in person, and she's so integral to our game environment, our game experience. And so I'm glad that everyone was able to get a taste of what she offers today.
Thank you. And then Ashlyn. As Shana was talking about, Ellie is a really powerful example of the shift that's happening in women's sports. And as a legend in this space, you've seen the ups and downs of this industry. So can you paint us a picture of what this moment is currently for women in sports?
Yeah, I think for women's sports right now, it's not just a moment, it's a movement. I'm always very hesitant to say that. I said that in front of Billie Jean King, and she was like, girl, we've been here before. So that was humbling. But it feels different. It does feel different, and we are really seeing the visibility of how women in sports can impact culture. I would argue and say women's sports is the leading driver behind culture, period. Whether it's fashion, whether it's social justice. I do feel that we are walking billboards, and we are not afraid to use our platforms and stand on the right side of change, which our male counterparts not always understand how important and impactful that is.
Right. Steph, from a business perspective, what do you think is driving this momentum?
I mean, it's so incredible. It's skyrocketing right now, women's sports. It's an incredible moment to be in women's sports, and it really comes back down to visibility. That's why I named my company Viz, Voice in Sport, because with more visibility will come more investment. And we are now starting to see that. So if you look at NWSL, the average amount right now that a team is actually at is $104 million. That's up 57% from last year, 1 year alone. So with visibility comes investment, and you get to hear from incredible athletes like this, but we need to be doing it consistently. So while the momentum is great, there are some really fundamental challenges right now. The first one is that only 10% of sponsorship dollars go to women athletes. 10. Only 15% of media coverage today is covering women's sports. And of the top 100 highest paid athletes in 2024, how many women were there? 0. Damn, somebody said damn. Yes. So while there's so much momentum, we are going to be in this fight for a while, and things need to fundamentally change across the ecosystem. So we need to look at tackling things like, how are the brands approaching women athletes? It needs to go beyond sponsorship dollars, and it needs to shift to strategic investments, where you're thinking differently about how you go after and support women athletes.
Then you have to look at the investors. If there's any investors in this room, this is a growth moment for women's sports, but we're just getting started if you pay attention to the numbers. So you need to be thinking about how do we set up these leagues so that the athletes on this stage get more revenue and get more equity. And then finally, it's super important that the governing bodies get involved and they must actually mandate equal pay. We shouldn't have to fight for equal pay, it should be mandated. It should be something that is expected. So there's a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Elle, you're a professional women's hockey player and you're only 23 years old, just starting your career in the league. So what's it been like to start your career during this evolution of women's sports?
Yeah, as being up here with these women is definitely sort of I'm a little nervous up here. I'm a little starstruck. They've been so instrumental in changing the landscape of women's sports, and I'm really appreciative that I'm able to come out of college and step into the landscape that we have right now. That said, as you were touching on, there's a lot more work to do, and I think that my generation understands that we have to continue that work so that it's not a moment, it is a movement. And so I'm just doing my best in my rookie year right now to learn from the older women who have been here and been fighting and been struggling for a really long time, and sort of soak up as much knowledge as I can from them so that when I'm in their shoes and I'm able to enact change and make things happen, I'm ready to do it.
You already are doing it. Thank you. Talia, as an Olympic athlete, you've been really vocal about the need for better health and safety policies for athletes. What changes do you think are most needed to make sure that female athletes get both adequate care and support?
You know, I think sometimes, that's really loud, sorry. We have to look past the dollars. I know in my case that you're talking about, there was a situation at the 2021 Olympic trials where there was record heat waves in Oregon, and the organization moved the events for the track meet, but they didn't move ours, I think due to TV. And I ended up collapsing on the track, had no medical attention, did not make the Olympic team. But I did make the 2024 Olympic team, so. So I think sometimes it's just important to put the athletes first. That, you know, TV might have to suffer, but better the TV viewers than the athletes that are out there, because we are people. We have feelings, we have families to go home to. Some of us have kids, so again, I think it's just important to remember that athletes are human. All of us women, we are human, and that's the biggest thing for me.
If you put your kid in public school, the experience that they will have in their sports program will be lesser than a boy's. That will continue all the way elementary school, all the way to college, where there is 93% of the schools today in the NCAA that are not offering the same amount of participation opportunities as they are to men. Most of the schools are also not offering as many scholarship dollars to women, by millions and millions of dollars at each school. So imagine your daughter, our daughters are going through their experience in life, in sport, and they're feeling lesser than. That is going to have a profound impact on how they feel about themselves, their worth, and their confidence. And that is why policy is really important to effectively drive change outside of the brands and the governing bodies and the investors that I spoke about earlier. There are 3 things everyone in this room can pay attention to right now in women's sports policy that are vital to our success and the future success of our daughters. The first one is the Fair Play for Women Act. This is a new piece of legislation that my organization started with Senator Murphy. It is going to strengthen Title IX. Title IX is about non-discrimination. It's about preventing discrimination in public institutions, and right now there's no education on Title IX sport equity in schools. There is no mandated training. There's no enforcement. So if your school is discriminating against girls in sport, nobody's doing anything about it. So this Fair Play for Women Act will actually bring better education, data and transparency, and enforcement to schools. The second thing to be aware of is the House versus NCAA settlement. Anybody know what that is? Okay, look it up. There's $2.8 billion that are going to be distributed to women collegiate athletes as back pay. Guess how much is going to the men? 90% is going to male football and male basketball players.
So again, there are things happening that you can do. And the third one is vital to pay attention to is the Trump administration is currently putting out executive orders that are banning trans women from sport. And they're using it under the guise of protecting girls and women in sport. In January, a bill passed, H.R. 28, called Protecting Girls and Women in Sport. And all it actually does is ban trans women from participating in sport. But it's not tackling the real issues that we are facing, that these women are facing, or that our daughters are facing at school. Those real issues are the institutions that continue to discriminate against women's sports programs. It's the schools, the leadership people, the positions of power, their decisions that they're making. And ultimately, it's on everyone in this room to get informed about what's happening at the school or the experience that your daughters are having. So I hope you are inspired to go out and pay attention to those 3 policy things that are happening today, and support the great work from the women on the stage.
To March of 2020. The pandemic hit, Stanford sent us home, longing for connection and purpose. I started tutoring kids online. Working with these students, I observed they weren't just struggling with school. They were disengaged, uninspired, absorbing and regurgitating what they read in a textbook, but had no idea why any of it mattered. So I started applying what they were learning in school to my passions. One of them asked for math help. I was not as passionate about math. So I called Alec, an aerospace engineer at Stanford who loves math. Instead of drilling equations, Alec showed them how math makes airplanes fly. And suddenly, light bulb, sparks, magic. That student wasn't just learning the math, he felt connected to it. And that's when I realized this is how education should work. We were the spinach in their milkshake, teaching them the fundamentals without them even realizing it. What started as a handful of students became a movement. Parents told their friends, my college peers stuck in their childhood bedrooms, craving purpose, became mentors. And Alec, remember the aerospace engineer Alec? He became my co-founder, and Curious Cardinals was born. I don't have a Stanford degree, but I have 10,000 hours in connection.
And what we do at Vital Voices is we search the world for them. Those leaders who are on the front lines, chipping away and taking on some of the world's greatest challenges, from peace building to climate to disinformation. Women who are truly refining and defining what power means and a new reality for all of us. I'm thrilled to be joined in discussion today by 4 such women we've worked with over the years. Let me introduce them and bring them onto the stage. First, Aya Chebbi is joining us from Tunisia. Aya is the founder of Nala Feminist Collective. Next, we have Miriam Jalalabi. She's co-founder of the Syrian Women's Political Movement. Next, Nika Kovic. Nika has joined us from Slovenia. Nika leads and is the founding director of the 8th of March Research Institute. And finally, let's give it up for Nobel Peace Laureate, Laima Boyer. So, Laima, I want to start with you, of course. You just got seated. You led one of the most extraordinary efforts for peace and revolution in Liberia. And you did it by bringing women leaders together and crossing lines that typically divide. Muslim and Christian women coming together. How did you build that movement? And for those in the audience who are feeling like here in the United States, where do we go? What do we do? How do we build a movement? How do we speak out? What advice do you have for us?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you all for having me. Liberia, I was 17 when the war started, fresh out of high school. We went in the circle of that war for 14 years. We successfully killed 10% of our population. I tell people when the war started, even though I was 17, I had never seen a dead person. So the first time I saw a dead person on the street, The dogs were eating the cubs. I froze. And as the war progressed, I could walk past a dead person. So it becomes normalized. By 2003, it was really bad. And the way we describe our lives is that we went from bad to worse to ridiculous. Women, about 65% were allegedly raped or sexually assaulted. At that moment, a child will be walking to the market and someone will pick him up, throw him in a pickup truck, and take him to the war front. So people were losing their children left, right, and center. And I was really angry. You know, people say, oh, don't be angry. I'll come back to that anger part. But I was really angry and looking for a way. And I met some women who were also looking for a way. And we decided, let's come together. And how did we come together, Elise? We came together with $10 US. The meeting we had, our first meeting, we sat at a desk that had bullet hole in it. And it was strapped on a brick. All of the chairs were broken. We sat there. We were 7 and said we needed to do something. So we wrote a statement. But the statement we wrote, someone said, let's say the women of Liberia. And I said to them, it's going to be disingenuous. We're 7 people. How do we claim to be the women of Liberia? 7 of us. So we wrote the statement and named ourselves. By naming ourselves, we gained traction. The next day, all of those in media wanted to know who were the 7 fools that wrote their names because they were about to be killed. Because we lived in dictatorship, the war. So once people came and started asking us, we had a friend who was in media. We gave her that $10 and said, put it in the news. That's how it went in the news. Then we decided, let's bring the Muslim women, because we had worked with the Muslim women. We had worked with the Christian women, and they had formed themselves into peace groups. We brought them together and said, when your child is killed, when you cry, is the tears of the Christian woman different from that of the Muslim woman? The answer was no. And the question was, as we sit in this room, if someone came and opened fire, can the bullet choose a Christian woman or Christian woman from a Muslim woman? The answer was no. Women were sold. We put that movement together. We had no clue what we were doing, but the one thing we knew was that we wanted to bring our country back to peace. So our slogan was peace first, peace last, peace today, peace forever. First day we came out and we were about 65 women. We did a silent march. Next time we were about 250. When we unveiled our movement, we were about 2,500 women. Wow. Charles Taylor, who was the president then, came and passed by us. He didn't stop. Next day he passed, he didn't stop, and then he didn't come to see us again. A turning point in our movement was when we were insistent that the government went to the peace table. And most times people would say, what was peculiar first for Liberia was that we gained independence in 1847. Women were not allowed to vote in 1957, 100 plus years later. So we had a history of women not being in public, women not being involved. And so even the Christian and Muslim women doing this was unheard of. One of the reasons why it was important for us to be outside, if you go back to all of the footages from the war in Liberia, you would think that there were no women, because all of the media were only showing boys with guns, men with guns, and the women were absent. So when we stepped out with our movement, we invaded a space that had been taken for men only. And so if I may answer your question about today US, because our story is in a documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. You can watch it. But today world that we live in, I think the silence is deafening.
Yeah.
People are complaining in front of their TVs and in front of their computers. No action is crazy. No action is nonsensical. No action is irrelevant, especially when you find yourself in a time where tyranny is about to choke the life out of you. Today, the silence is deafening because a lot of people are still comfortable. We can still sit in YouTube office and talk. We can still travel and do different things. In Liberia, we got our wake-up call when the war came and choked us. And I think the world that we live in today, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Palestine, wherever you find yourself as a woman, this is not the moment for your silence to be deafening.
Yeah.
This is the moment for you to write if you can write, for you to smile if you can smile, and if that smile is going to bring a change somewhere, you can do it. For you to cry if you can cry. But what the moment is calling all of us for in this world is to take action. This is a moment for action, people. Bring children, girls and boys from your community into your living room. Start talking to them about what peace is. And for me, I have come to a place where I understand that peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is the presence of conditions that give dignity to all. So step out of this room and ask yourself, how many people are living in dignity? And what are the times calling me to do? I'll park it there.
Yeah, I want you to talk about what made your movement, particularly your most recent endeavors, just unstoppable.
Yeah, so firstly, I think that the condition of every single movement is that it begins with moment of darkness. A moment of fear when you decide that you will open this window of opportunity and push for a change. And my window of change happened when I was living in US for 1 year, and your constitutional court just took away reproductive rights from you. And I was shocked by like hopelessness and how scary it was, and I became obsessed with this idea to protect reproductive rights in Europe. And I found a way. So basically the way is that you write a legal proposal and then you ask European Commission to change European law. And for doing this, you need to collect 1 million signatures of citizens. Only 10 initiatives did this, and every single person said to me, this is impossible. All the men were saying, no, don't do this, like it's legally not possible, but I found a group of lawyers in their 20s, girls, who wrote a proposal and it was accepted, and they said, now you can collect 1 million signatures. And they thought you won't make it. But what we did is that with joy, with smile, I always say laughter and smile puts the enemies away, and all those men who are violent become so afraid of you. So we did this huge campaign, which was filled with pink color, with glitters, with stories about solidarity, about protection of reproductive rights. We built a movement in every single country in the European Union, made out of young people and retired women who have a lot of time. They were working as a community, and we didn't collect just 1 million signatures, but 1,150,000 of them. And we became the biggest movement, feminist movement in Europe. We will now go to the institutions. But if I give you like 3 advices how to build unstoppable movement, is firstly be stubborn. Like work all the time, don't stop. And every single man who says to you, don't do it, like do it even more. And second thing is, you cannot do it alone. We women are super badass and we can do a lot, but also we need men allies. I was lucky enough that President Obama asked me to do a takeover of his Instagram and show the campaign, that Mark Ruffalo supported us on Oscars, that so many men were on the streets collecting signatures for their granddaughters. And the third thing is, have a lot of fun, because we do this in our free time. This is something that it is super hard, and if you don't have fun, and if you don't dance, and if you don't find joy in it, you will stop fighting, and we need to fight more than ever.
You all always remind me that the impossible is just a word, and we've got to make it possible. And speaking of that, Miriam, you have been and leading as co-founder the Syrian women's political movement. You've just returned from Syria. Talk about what people, I'm sure, told you was impossible, but you never gave up hope. The falling of that regime, 14 years, and you just returned.
Yes, yes. I opened my eyes. I remember the first stories that I remember is my mom looking for my dad in detention centers, in prisons. And then my family fled. We all fled. That's how I ended up being in the US eventually, from passing through different countries. And when the regime of 54 years fell at a time when I'm looking, oh, what's happening in America? And it was quite of a sudden, you know, on December 8th when this regime fell, it was like, now we're entering the future. And it come to us so fast. Because in 2017, after struggling to put down the regime, as you know, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries have come out against, the dictatorships, and we tried to do something that was different. Is that how can we come together, like Nika was saying now, how can we come together and create something different? And I want to reiterate some of the stuff that has been said also, that our power, we've realized, cannot be done with one by one, because the whole of us would be so much stronger than the sum of our parts. And we realized this very fast, and we Syrian women came together over to Moscow, to Russia. So what happened to us is that, what do we do now? All of our songs are about resistance, all of our dances are about resistance. What do we do now to actually look into the future and do something that's more hopeful, that gives women and men and everybody in Syria some kind of a vision of what might be better for us in the future? So having worked for over 8 years together as the Syrian Women Political Movement, we started with 2 people, became 7, 8, became 28. We were over 200. It's like we all got together very fast meetings over Zoom, and Zoom after COVID, thankfully, has become kind of cut down the distances, because we were talking to our members, 40% of our members who were inside Syria, who we never met actually, because we're in the diaspora. There are people who are refugees, all over the region. We all come together, we decide this is the moment for us to go to Damascus. I hadn't been for 14 years back in Damascus, and we decided to go. When I arrived to the border, I ask about my status. I'm entering, and they say you're wanted by 3 branches of the government. I'm like, yeah, a badge of honor. My friend had 4 arrest warrants. I'm like, she wins, over me. So this is the kind of mentality we went in. And on January 8th, the Syrian Women Political Movement members and people came together to create this conference that invited 350 people. And one of the press and members and everybody in the middle of Damascus, in one of the older, Sham hotel. Sham is Damascus in Arabic, that was revered and, considered, a center for opposition meetings and people coming together. And one of the people who came to this conference was Thuraya al-Hadi. Thuraya al-Hadi had given birth 2 weeks earlier, prior to this, in Raqqa. Raqqa is 2 days distance from Damascus to come by bus. She decides, she's a member of the movement, she's like, I am not going to miss this moment. And she brings her daughter, Salam, of 2 weeks. She comes on a bus, she stops on the way because she couldn't continue, it's too long of a journey. She comes and attends the conference. Shams Antar comes from also Qamishli, which is also the other end of Syria from Damascus. She's from Kurdish background. She was not allowed to speak her language. She was not allowed to wear her clothes. She comes to the conference with her traditional clothes and speaking her language. And we had this amazing energy, this amazing meeting that made sure that we gave hope to everybody who's there. We don't know what's going to happen in Syria. We're very hopeful, we're cautiously optimistic, but it was very important that we come together. But we're getting there with all of the work for us working together.
And I think I can imagine it's not just the money, it's the symbolism of solidarity.
Yes.
I want to come to you, Naya. So you were the first youth envoy to the African Union. You have always been in rooms where maybe you're not welcome, raising your voice. I mean, all of these women are badasses. But you have really pioneered incredible change by bringing the power of young women from across all of Africa together through Knowles Feminists. So talk a little bit about that and some of the greatest successes you've had.
Thank you, Alice. I can't get enough of hearing Nika and Mama Lima's stories, and now I have a new sister, Mariam, and it seems like a panel of troublemakers because you were talking about warrant arrest. I got jailed a couple times, and just to reflect that I've been hearing a lot of people today talking about when they felt in charge, and I love you, Diane. And I remember that, okay, when I actually really felt in charge, and I think it's the moment I believed that change is possible. I lived under dictatorship for 23 years, and I was part of change. I was part of a youth movement that toppled the dictatorship, that ended the regime and started the Second Republic. And I think when you feel like in charge of being a political being, when you feel you have power in your voice, when you feel that you're not here to blame or watch the system, you're here to change it, it empowers you to keep the hope. It empowers you to keep moving forward. So on intergenerational co-leadership, I was appointed the youth envoy. In every room, the next person sitting next to me would be 40, 50 years older. The youngest, the only female, and I wanted to find a strategy to navigate the system. It actually started as a personal strategy. So first of all, I am in that position because of the many African women who made that possible, who paved the way for it. Because we're talking about the belly of the beast, an institution that is male dominated. But then also I became friends with the senior women. And these are women like UNDSG, Amina Mohammed, who would step out of the panel and give me her seat. These are women like Dr. Vera Songwe, the former boss of the Economic Commission on Africa, who would take my hand into a bilateral meeting because the protocol outside decided you're a kiddo and you can't meet the president, right? So being young and female on the continent is a dangerous place. You face ageism and misogyny at the same time. And I'm talking about a continent that has the average age of African leaders at 64 and the average age of the population at 20. So it's definitely not representative of the population. And so it worked. I was friends with the senior leaders who opened the door and who supported me actually to succeed in the mandate. So I took that to become the mainstream. And I started to talk to 55 eagles of 55 African countries to convince them that if you don't want to be the next ousted dictator, we got to co-lead this together. Right? So I started to convince them of an approach of intergenerational co-leadership. And what that means in their countries is lowering the age of entry into government, waiving the money for electoral candidate for young people, appointing massively affirmative action for youth in ministerial and parliamentary seats. And in 2 years, we increased youth leadership, actually the highest rate since the 80s. And I say the 80s because these same leaders right now were in their 20s and 30s in the 80s, right? So it works. And we even passed a resolution in the AU Peace and Security Council on Youth Peace and Security, the first and the only continent to do so. But then, leading a youth movement and being, I don't know how to say it, but really subjected to, we can be led by a young woman, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna put all my effort on women, right? Because at any point, yes, we need male allies, but they can just leave you behind. When the revolution happened in Tunisia and the transition, good job. Women were on the front line. Now we cut the cake as men. So I'm building an army of women to take charge of the continent. And our... my mission really is for every young woman to be in her political power. Last year, we hosted a NALFM summit in Namibia to rally behind the first female presidential candidates in July. And we wanted to rally the youth vote 3 months after she was elected president. We're doing it in Tanzania this year. We're going to do a 2027 election in Kenya. And we're going to massively take charge of our continent, because we're not just about women being in leadership, we're training women on African feminist principles. We want them to lead differently. You know, we want them to be emotionally intelligent, to be collaborative. We want them to really give hope to this word that is very fucked up, but we would have to make it, it's not a choice anymore. We would have to make it. Something else I want to say on peace and security, I think we need to stop the weaponization of the words. The world we want to live in is violence-free, is stigma-free, is financially free for women, but it's also bullshit-free, because we're sick and tired of countries claiming to protect women's rights in other countries and then go and export arms to bomb the same women and girls they claim to protect. And we hold the United States accountable for $80 billion arms exports. That's 41% of the world's arms export. That has to stop. And even when the US puts an embargo on countries like Sudan, that no, we're not going to send arms there, they go around on paper, but they go around and give money to, you know, their allies to do the dirty work, right? So for me, right now, in this moment, there's so many countries we have to be in solidarity with. There's so many struggles we have to be in solidarity with, because we never know when that will hit us. So we have to be together and we have to understand each other's struggle. And at this moment, Sudan really needs that kind of support. 11 million people displaced, girls as young as 12 years old being subjected to sexual slavery. The war has to stop. And if one thing I would ask you to do is go on change.org, sign a petition called Ceasefire in Sudan. That's, you know, one click of a petition, that's an act of solidarity.
One thing I say to people living in a world and being in a space where I see conflict, I see death, I see destruction, I see oppression and suppression every day, every day. There's no way I will continue to do this work if I'm pessimistic about a future of good. But quickly, I would say a few years ago, I met an imam who brought 4 girls to me because they were at risk of being married, or I took them and sent them to school today. One is a doctor, one is an engineer, and 2 are accountants. This year, Imam brought 27 girls. And I've taken those 27 and we started sending them to school. That's hope. Not giving up when you don't even know where your journey will end.
Thank you. Mika.
Yeah, for me, hope is in the moments when you build a community with unlikely allies. In my home country, I get a lot of death threats. I was physically attacked, and a couple of months ago, I was really, really badly attacked, and they said that they will do something on one event to me. And a group of super conservative old men came, and they said, you helped us when we needed help with our village, and you showed up, and now we are here. Even though we don't believe in abortion rights, we will stand next to you and protect you if anyone will want to do something to you. And this gives me hope that we see humanity in each other and
I feel that we coming together and working together, no matter how hard it seems and how difficult it is, there's always a tipping point. There's always a point when things will change and things will topple and we will change this patriarchy. I think that it is very important also, like Aya said here, is that it's very important for us to continue working in spite of all of that's happening in the systems of the world, like where we talk and not, you know, that not act according as we talk. And women having been truthful and transparent and working this hard, I always believe that energy, good energy, karma will create that change. And it happened for us in Syria. We're still hoping that it's going to keep on going. But when the regime in Syria toppled, it was like, yes, our work didn't go to waste. We have been preparing for that moment for a long time. And I believe it will happen. Those tipping points always happen. So let's wait for that tipping, be ready for it so that we can take action when that happens.
Right. Yes.
So I wake up in the morning, I mean, activists, we get burned out, we get depressed, you know, we reach an edge of like giving up. But I tell myself, do something about it, that frustrates you. I don't think you should be a civil society leader or political leader to be an activist. You can be an engineer, a model, athlete. We saw amazing, incredible people, a YouTuber, content creator. But if you do something about it, then you're an activist. And don't shy away from supporting young women leaders. It's not being partisan if you are political. Institutions are run by individuals. We have to support and identify and invest and rally behind these young, progressive women leaders. If I would choose, it would be young, African, and female, and smash the patriarchy every day.
In charge of your
Well, actually, I think you missed the beginning because everybody else heard when I said it, but I'm happy to repeat it. But before anything...
What have you learned today about being in charge?
Okay, oh, well, that's a great thing. First of all, when we talked about hope, and I was pretty depressed yesterday, and waking up this morning, I had a bad fall, I'm achy everywhere, I'm so depressed about what's going on in the world. And then you come here, and you listen to all these women, and I think it lifted us all. And I think that hope is this. So I'm very grateful, very happy that we've done this, and the other, can I say something that has nothing to do with it, but it's a little trick because I've lived so long. I have a trick, and because they're all talking about, how do we deal with men and so on. So when you have a difficult situation with a man, the trick is think of him as a little boy.
Not difficult sometimes.
No, but think of him as a little boy. Like, think of talking to him like you talk to your son, a small son. That will make you slightly more seductive. It's like sometimes I used to sit next to a really boring man in a party, and I said, what am I going to do? And the trick was always make him talk about his mother. So when you deal with men that you don't like and this and that, just think of him as a little boy, and that will be helpful. That's it. I'm sorry, I had nothing to...
That is an excellent.
I'm sorry, it didn't answer the question.
That's okay.
I wanted to give that trick.
You did. That's how you put yourself in charge
We all
in that
need
situation.
tricks right now. We need tricks for seduction.
Yes, okay, well, maybe later in the panel, we're going to get to seduction tricks from either of you, if you have anything to share. Tina, the question I wanted to ask you is, I don't want to say reinvented yourself because it's been you the whole time, but you've had this succession of absolutely amazing jobs, right? Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, Talk, Women in the World, now you're doing your Substack. How do you know, what is the thing in your head that tells you time to do the next thing?
Well, I have a very, very short attention. Impatience is really the thing. I'm not a good steward. I like to be in on the berth. I like to have a mission, saving things, absolutely, flat out. It's a mission. It's mission impossible. That's what really gets my juices going. And once it's achieved, I start to kind of, my attention starts to wander. So that's really all it is, which is that I love to be in on the creation, and I also feel when the creation is done, it's time for me to move.
What are you enjoying about doing the Substack right now?
I am really enjoying the Substack. I mean, they came after me to write it, it took them I was very annoying. I kept on dithering and saying I didn't really want to do it, and that was fearful to me because the idea of not having an editor, a structure, a whole thing awaiting the copy, as it were, was so foreign to me. But I've actually come to find it very, very interesting and fun because it's such a direct connection to the reader. It's more direct than anything you could have. And they do these great sort of stats, which you can look at all the time, which tells you exactly how many subscribers you've got, how much, the graph, the whole thing. And you could think, oh my gosh, I was out at DVS this afternoon and I made, $1,500. There's something actually rather gratifying. It's like gambling. I had a little flutter this afternoon.
Gambling with the power of your brain.
My sentences, seduced a few people into subscribing. So I'm actually enjoying it a great deal, and I do think that the Substack is also on the kind of cutting edge of where we are all going. I really wouldn't want to have at this point, a column in a publication. Right. I like this new world of voices, all these voices sort of clamoring away and having their say, and they're all on Substack, it seems. So, yeah, I'm having a fun time with it, actually.
And by the way, word to the wise in the audience, if you have not read Vanity Fair Diaries, which is Tina's obviously diary of her time as editor there, you have to read it. It's really, I want to see the movie of that one. Ms. Tina, sticking with this idea of kind of reinvention, you've done so many things. You've been a designer, a businesswoman, a mentor, a mother to 3 daughters, because you raised Kelly Rowland as well. When you look back at that, what has been kind of the through line to you? Like, what is the consistent sort of Ms. Tina thing that has gone through all of that?
I think more than anything, just the need at the time, whatever the need was for me, and just having new adventures. Very much like Tina said, I don't get bored, but I like new adventures. I like new challenges. And I think a big part of it was I built the confidence as I went along. I didn't start off very confident. I think with I was doing the girls' hair, and then I started doing costumes out of a need. And as I did things, I became more confident. And I was like, oh, you did a pretty good job on that. And so I think I just grew. And I think the later in life it becomes, the more I really don't feel the pressure to prove anything to anyone. And I feel really free to just be myself and do what I want to do. And not worried so much about, I had this philosophy that I would never do anything to embarrass my kids. That was one of my main goals. So I'm like, I'm going to stay in the background, I'm going to be quiet. And, and I did that for many, many years. And something about turning 60 that I just said, I'm just to the point where I'm going to do me. And not worry about, what the world has to say. They're grown now, and, they got to do their thing, and I got to do mine. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that happened when you turned 60.
I said, this is one thing I'm not going to screw up. I'm going to put everything I have into it and try to get it right. And I did. And, Tina and I were having a very interesting talk outside, and she brought something to my attention that women who have good relationships with their mothers, they become their confidant, and they become their shield, and their, you said
conciliary,
which is like their lawyer.
Yeah.
Just a protector of your kids. And so that resonated with me, because that is what I wanted to be. And I think that's the best job that I've ever had in my life, is being a mother.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was time for me to tell my own story, because there are so many misconceptions about my family, and I don't want people to have that power to tell the story. I want to tell it myself.
Yeah. Diane, does the word matriarch resonate with you? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, in my family they call me Oracle, or either Oracle or Goat, and so I'm the Oracle. So I'm definitely the matriarch, but they don't really take me seriously inside the family. So I always tell them I need an audience outside. I don't get the recognition. But I did come up with something the other day. I said, when you get older, and your children get older, and your grandchildren get older, you actually, what did I say? You realize that you are the children you have.
Wait, spool that out a lot.
The children you have. So think about that. Well, you did pretty good. You are the queen. Anyway, so yeah. But about reinvention, since I didn't get a reinvention question, and I am the maximum reinventionist. I reinvent myself every day.
Yeah.
And it's very tiring. And it's funny because on one side, I am confident, definitely. I was always confident. I was confident as a little girl. I mean, you know, and the mirror is where I get my confidence, not because the way I look at all, but the eye contact with me. That's very important because that's what gives me strength. Having said that, I mean, at least twice a week, I wake up as a total loser. No, but I think it's important to say it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and it doesn't last very long. I get up and then I get going. But I am tough on myself. So anyway.
And what is that tough on yourself? What does it feel like? Are you criticizing things you've done, or are they regrets?
No, but no guilt.
No guilt.
Guilt is forbidden in myself. I have no guilt. My children know that. What am I saying? What was the question?
About what you're feeling when you're waking up.
Oh, when I feel like it, because but then I charge myself. But the point is, I think the most important thing, which is, I say that all the time, is really that you are true to yourself, that you're hard on yourself, that you're also loving to yourself. And at the end, I really trust myself first. I have a loving family, I have a really loving husband, but at the end, the person that gives me the most strength is me.